Thank you for joining me for another one of my videos. My name is Cliff, and this series of videos is called 99 Problems But My God Ain't One. I'm listing this one as number 44, and it's called Why Do the War Veterans Know the Truth About the Wars and the Rest of Us Don't? How is it that I can know this much stuff about what's going on in the whole world and us as human beings if I wasn't taught by the Master himself? So I just want you to know that God is in control. Jesus Christ is our Savior. We are to repent and know that He is Lord Almighty.
Good afternoon. My name is John Michael Turner. I currently reside in Burlington, Vermont. I served with Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines as an automatic machine gunner. There's a term, once a Marine, always a Marine, but there's also the term, eat the apple, F the Corps. I don't work for you no more. On April 18th, 2006, I had my first confirmed kill. This man was innocent. I don't know his name. I called him the Fat Man. He was walking back to his house, and I shot him in front of his friend and his father. The first round didn't kill him after I had hit him up here in his neck area, and afterwards he started screaming and looked right into my eyes. So I looked at my friend who I was on post with, and I said, well, I can't let that happen. So I took another shot and took him out. He was then carried away by the rest of his family. It took 7 people to carry his body away. We were all congratulated after we had our first kills, and that happened to have been mine. My company commander personally congratulated me, as he did everyone else in our company. This is the same individual who had stated that whoever gets their first kill by stabbing them to death will get a 4-day pass when we return from Iraq. This is the same individual who had stated that whoever gets their first kill by stabbing them to death will get a 4-day pass when we return from Iraq. This man right here was my 3rd confirmed kill. As you can see, he was riding his bicycle. Later on in the day, we went ahead and we had CBS Laura Logan with us, but she was with the other squad. And so she wasn't with us. So myself and 2 other people went ahead and took out some individuals because we were excited about the firefight we had just gotten into, and we didn't have a cameraman or woman with us. With that being said, anytime we did have embedded reporters with us, our actions would change drastically. We never acted the same. We were always on key with everything, did everything by the books. The man on the bicycle, he was left in the street for about 10 minutes until we realized that we needed to leave where we were. And his body was dragged about 10 feet to the right of him, where his body was thrown behind a rock wall, and his bicycle was thrown on top of him. The reason I am doing this today is not only for myself and for the rest of society to hear, but it's for all those who can't be here to talk about the things that we went through, talk about the things that we did. Those 4 crosses and this memorial service were for the 5 guys in Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines that we lost. Throughout our unit, we had 18 that got killed. With that being said, that is my testimony. I just want to say that I am sorry for the hate and destruction that I've inflicted on innocent people, and I'm sorry for the hate and destruction that others have inflicted on innocent people. At one point, it was okay, but reality has shown that it's not, and that this is happening, and that until people hear about what is going on with this war, it will continue to happen and people will continue to die. I am sorry for the things that I did. I am no longer the monster that I once was. Thank you.
My name is Mike Preisner. I joined the Army, left for basic training on my 18th birthday in June of 2001. I was assigned to the 10th Mountain Division, and in March of 2003, I was attached to the 173rd Airborne Brigade and deployed to northern Iraq. So when I first joined the Army, we were told that racism no longer existed in the military. A legacy of inequality and discrimination was suddenly washed away by something called the Equal Opportunity Program. We would sit through mandatory classes, and every unit had this EO representative to ensure that no elements of racism could resurface. And the Army seemed firmly dedicated to smashing any hint of racism. And then September 11th happened, and I began to hear new words like towel head and camel jockey, and the most disturbing, sand nigger. And these words did not initially come from my fellow soldiers, but from my superiors, my platoon sergeant, my company first sergeant, battalion commander. All the way up the chain of command, these terms, these viciously racist terms, were suddenly acceptable. And I noticed that the most overt racism came from veterans of the first Gulf War. And those were the words they used when they were incinerating civilian convoys. Those are the words they used when this government deliberately targeted civilian infrastructure, bombing water supplies knowing that it would kill hundreds of thousands of children, bombing water supplies knowing that it would kill hundreds of thousands of children. Those are the words the American people used when they allowed this government to sanction Iraq. And this is something that many people forget, and we can't forget, is that we've just learned that we've killed over 1 million Iraqis since this invasion, but we already killed 1 million Iraqis in the 90s through sanctions and bombings prior to this invasion, so the number truly is much higher. But when I got to Iraq in 2003, I learned a new word, and that word was Haji. Haji was the enemy. Haji was every Iraqi. He was not a person, a father, a teacher, or a worker. And it's important, we've heard this word a lot during Winter Soldier, but it's important to understand where this word came from. And to Muslims, the most important thing is to take a pilgrimage to Mecca. It's the Hajj, and someone who has taken this pilgrimage is a Haji. And it's something that in traditional Islam is the highest calling in the religion. So we took the best thing for a Muslim and made it into the worst thing. But history did not start with us, and since the creation of this country, racism has been used to justify expansion and oppression. The Native Americans were called savages, the Africans were called all sorts of things to excuse slavery, and Vietnam veterans know of the multitude of words used to justify that imperialist war. So Haji was the word we used. It was the word we used on this particular mission I'm going to talk about. And we've heard a lot about different raids and kicking down the doors of people's houses and ransacking their houses. But this mission was different, a different kind of raid. I never got any explanation for these orders. We were only told that this group of houses, 5 or 6 houses, were now property of the U.S. military, and we had to go in and make those families leave those houses. So we went to these houses and informed the families that those homes were no longer their homes. We provided them no alternative, nowhere to go, no compensation, and they were very confused and very scared and did not know what to do and would not leave, so we had to remove them from those houses. One family in particular, a woman with 2 small girls, a very elderly man and 2 middle-aged men, we dragged them from their houses and threw them onto the street. And arrested the men because they refused to leave, arrested the old man, and sent them off to prison. And continued to stand. He picked him up and slammed him against the wall several times. And then he left, and when the man went down on the ground again, I noticed blood pouring down from under the sandbag. And so I let him sit, and when I noticed my sergeant coming again, I would tell him quickly to stand up. And then I realized that I was supposed to be guarding my unit from this detainee, and at that point I realized I was guarding the detainee from my unit. And I tried hard to be proud of my service, but all I could feel was shame. and racism could no longer mask the reality of the occupation. These were people, these were human beings. I've since been plagued by guilt anytime I see an elderly man, like the one who couldn't walk, who we rolled onto a stretcher and told the Iraqi police to take him away. I feel guilt anytime I see a mother with her children, like the one who cried hysterically and screamed that we are worse than Saddam as we forced her from her home. I feel guilt anytime I see a young girl, like the one I grabbed by the arm and dragged into the street. We were told we were fighting terrorists. The real terrorist was me, and the real terrorism is this occupation. Racism within the military has long been an important tool to justify the destruction and occupation of another country. It has long been used to justify the killing, subjugation, and torture of another people. Racism is a vital weapon employed by this government. It is a more important weapon than a rifle, a tank, a bomber, or a battleship. It is more destructive than an artillery shell, or a bunker buster, or a Tomahawk missile. While all those weapons are created and owned by this government, they are harmless without people willing to use them. Those who send us to war do not have to pull a trigger or lob a mortar round. They do not have to fight the war, they merely have to sell the war. They need a public who is willing to send their soldiers into harm's way. They need soldiers who are willing to kill and be killed without question. They can spend millions on a single bomb, but that bomb only becomes a weapon when the ranks in the military are willing to follow orders to use it. They can send every last soldier anywhere on earth, but there will only be a war if soldiers are willing to fight. And the ruling class, the billionaires who profit from human suffering, who care only about expanding their wealth, controlling the world economy, understand that their power lies only in their ability to convince us that war, oppression, and exploitation is in our interest. They understand that their wealth is dependent on their ability to convince the working class to die to control the market of another country. And convincing us to kill and die is based on their ability to make us think that we are somehow superior. Soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen have nothing to gain from this occupation. The vast majority of people living in the U.S. have nothing to gain from this occupation. In fact, not only do we have nothing to gain, but we suffer more because of it. We lose limbs, endure trauma, and give our lives. Our families have to watch flag-draped coffins lowered into the earth. Millions in this country without health care, jobs, or access to education must watch this government squander over $450 million a day on this occupation. Poor and working people in this country are sent to kill poor and working people in another country to make the rich richer. And without racism, soldiers would realize that they have more in common with the Iraqi people than they do with the billionaires who send us to war. I threw families onto the street in Iraq, only to come home and find families thrown onto the street in this country, in this tragic and unnecessary foreclosure crisis. And we need to wake up and realize that our real enemies are not in some distant land. They're not people whose names we don't know and cultures we don't understand. The enemy is people we know very well and people we can identify. The enemy is a system that wages war when it's profitable. The enemy is the CEOs who lay us off from our jobs when it's profitable. It's the insurance companies who deny us health care when it's profitable. It's the banks who take away our homes when it's profitable. Our enemy is not 5,000 miles away. They are right here at home. And if we organize and fight with our sisters and brothers, we can stop this war, we can stop this government, and we can create a better world.